The autumn wind swept across the Welsh countryside as Prince William adjusted his casual navy sweater and glanced at his watch. It was 6:30 on a Thursday evening, and the family had just finished their private dinner at their Welsh residence. Princess Kate was helping 9-year-old Princess Charlotte with her cardigan, while 11-year-old Prince George fidgeted with excitement near the front door. "Are we really going to a proper pub quiz, Papa?" George asked for the third time that evening, his eyes bright with anticipation. He had been talking about nothing else since William mentioned the idea 2 days earlier. William smiled and ruffled his son's hair. "Yes, but remember what we discussed about blending in. Tonight, we're just a normal family having fun." Kate emerged from the hallway, having swapped her usual elegant attire for dark jeans and a cream-colored jumper. She looked relaxed and genuinely excited about the evening ahead. "The children have been practicing their general knowledge all week," she said with a laugh. "Charlotte has been reading every encyclopedia she can find." Charlotte beamed with pride. "I know all the capital cities now, Mama. And I'll learn about dinosaurs and space, too." The decision to attend the weekly quiz night at the Dragon's Rest, a cozy pub in the nearby village of Landfairpool, had come about quite unexpectedly. William had been chatting with their security detail about local community events when Sergeant Davies mentioned that his own family never missed the Thursday quiz. The pub was known for its friendly atmosphere and challenging questions, and the landlord, Gareth Williams, had been running the quiz for over 15 years. "It sounds like exactly what we need," Kate had said when William shared the idea. "The children have been studying so hard, and we could all use a proper evening out with local families." As they prepared to leave, William called their private secretary to confirm the arrangements. The pub had been quietly informed of their visit, but the other quiz participants remained unaware. The Royal Protection officers would blend into the crowd, and the family would use the back entrance to avoid any unnecessary attention. "Remember, children," Kate said gently as they walked toward their modest car, "tonight we're just a Cambridge family. Be polite, have fun, and try your best with the questions." The drive through the Welsh countryside was peaceful, with rolling hills dotted by sheep and stone walls lining the narrow roads. George pressed his nose against the window, pointing out landmarks he recognized from their walks around the area. Charlotte practiced her tables quietly, determined to be ready for any mathematical questions that might arise. "I hope they ask about football," George said hopefully. "I've been following the Welsh teams like you suggested, Papa." William chuckled. "Well, let's see what tonight brings. But remember, it's not about winning. It's about enjoying ourselves and meeting the local families." As they approached the village, the warm glow of the Dragon's Rest came into view. The old stone building with its traditional slate roof and hanging flower baskets looked exactly like the kind of place where neighbors gathered for weekly traditions. Through the windows, they could see people already settling at tables with pints and soft drinks, quiz sheets spread before them. Kate reached back to squeeze Charlotte's hand. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" Charlotte shook her head firmly. "No, Mama. I am excited. It's like a big test, but fun." William parked behind the building as arranged, and they were quietly greeted by Gareth Williams, whose weathered face broke into a genuine smile. He was a man in his 60s with kind eyes and the sort of Welsh accent that made everything sound like a story. "Welcome to our little quiz night," he said warmly, shaking hands with each family member. "We're delighted to have you join us. I've saved you a table near the back where you'll be comfortable." The pub interior was everything they had hoped for. Low wooden beams, stone walls decorated with local photographs, and the comfortable buzz of conversation. About 30 people were scattered across 8 tables, ranging from university students to elderly couples who clearly knew each other well. As they settled at their table, Charlotte immediately began studying the quiz rules posted on a small card. "Look, Papa, there are 6 rounds. General knowledge, sport, entertainment, history, science, and a picture round." George was more interested in the other families around them. At the next table, a couple with twin boys about his age were quietly arguing about whether dolphins were mammals or fish. Across the room, an elderly man was confidently explaining Roman history to his granddaughter. Good evening, everyone. Gareth's voice boomed across the pub as he picked up his microphone. Welcome to another Thursday night quiz at the Dragon's Rest. We have some new faces tonight, so let me remind everyone of the rules. As Gareth explained the format, Kate noticed how relaxed the children seemed. This was exactly the kind of normal family experience they had hoped to give George and Charlotte, a chance to interact with their local community without the formality that usually surrounded royal engagements. William ordered soft drinks for the family and struck up a quiet conversation with the couple at the neighboring table. They introduced themselves as David and Sarah Jenkins, both teachers at the local primary school, with their 8-year-old twins, Reese and Owen. First time at the quiz? Sarah asked pleasantly. Yes, Kate replied. We've heard wonderful things about it. The children are very excited. Oh, you're in for a treat, David said with a grin. Gareth's questions are brilliant. Not too easy, not impossible. Perfect for family teams. As they chatted, Charlotte leaned over to Reese and Owen. Do you come here every week? She asked politely. Almost every week, Owen replied. Our ma'am and dad love it. Sometimes we win chocolates. The friendly atmosphere was exactly what the royal couple had hoped for. Here, surrounded by local families, their children could experience the joy of community traditions without the weight of their royal duties. George was already deep in conversation with David about Welsh rugby, while Charlotte was comparing notes with the Jenkins twins about their favorite subjects at school. Right then, Gareth announced, causing a hush to fall over the room. Let's begin with round 1, general knowledge. Question 1. Which planet is closest to the sun? Charlotte's hand shot up slightly before she remembered where she was and quickly wrote down her answer. Around the room, other families were huddling together, discussing their responses in hushed tones. As the questions continued, the Cambridge family found themselves working together naturally. William's knowledge of geography proved helpful, Kate's love of literature came in handy, and the children surprised everyone with their broad range of interests. Question 5. Gareth continued with a twinkle in his eye. Which British monarch had the longest reign before Queen Elizabeth II? William and Kate exchanged amused glances as Charlotte confidently wrote down Queen Victoria, while George nodded approvingly. It felt wonderfully surreal to be answering questions about their own family history in such a casual setting. The evening was unfolding exactly as they had hoped, a perfect blend of family fun, community spirit, and the simple pleasure of testing their knowledge alongside their Welsh neighbors. Hashtag building friendships. The second round proved to be sports, and George practically bounced in his seat with excitement. His months of following Welsh football teams and rugby clubs were about to pay off. William watched with pride as his son confidently answered questions about Cardiff City's founding year and the Welsh national rugby team's Grand Slam victories. Question 3. Gareth announced. Which Welsh footballer scored the most goals in the 2016 European Championship? George whispered urgently to his family. It's Gareth Bale. He scored 3 goals and helped Wales reach the semi-finals. The Jenkins family at the next table overheard and looked impressed. You know your Welsh football, David said approvingly to George. Are you a Wales supporter then? George nodded enthusiastically. Papa's been teaching me about all the Welsh teams. Did you know that Wales reached the semi-finals of Euro 2016? That was amazing. As the sports round continued, Charlotte found herself enjoying the questions more than she had expected. Her recent reading had included several books about Olympic sports, and she was able to help her family answer questions about swimming records and gymnastics. I never knew you were so interested in sports, Charlotte, Kate said softly, watching her daughter write down answers with determination. Miss Thompson at school says we should learn about everything, Charlotte replied seriously. And I like how athletes work so hard to get better. It's like practicing piano, but with running and jumping. The entertainment round brought its own surprises. When Gareth asked about children's book authors, Charlotte was in her element. She knew that Roald Dahl was Welsh, could name 3 books by Julia Donaldson, and even remembered that Lynn Reed Banks wrote The Indian in the Cupboard. At the table behind them, an elderly couple named Margaret and Tom Davies were struggling with the modern pop music questions. Charlotte, despite her young age, surprised everyone by knowing several of the answers from listening to radio in the car during their drives around Wales. How does she know all this? Margaret whispered to her husband, loud enough for the royal family to hear. Kate smiled and leaned back slightly. She's always been curious about everything. Sometimes I think she absorbs information like a sponge. Reminds me of our granddaughter, Tom said warmly. Always asking questions, always reading. Good to see young people who enjoy learning. The connection between the families was growing naturally. During the break between rounds 4 and 5, people began moving around the pub, stretching their legs and comparing their answer sheets. The Jenkins twins approached George and Charlotte, and soon the 4 children were deep in discussion about their favorite subjects at school. Do you like maths? Reese asked Charlotte. I love it, Charlotte replied enthusiastically, especially when we learn about patterns and shapes. What's your favorite? I like history, Owen said. We're learning about castles in Wales. Did you know there are more than 400 castles in Wales? Some are just ruins now, but some are still really big and impressive. George's eyes lit up. We visited some of them. Carnarvon Castle was incredible. The walls were so thick, and you could climb up the towers and see for miles. The children's natural enthusiasm was infectious, and their parents found themselves drawn into conversations with other families around them. William discovered that David Jenkins was passionate about environmental education and had started a school garden project that taught children about sustainable farming. It's amazing how interested the children are when they can see where their food comes from, David explained. We've got vegetables, herbs, even a small greenhouse now. That sounds wonderful, Kate said genuinely. We've been trying to teach our children about growing their own food too. There's something special about eating vegetables you've grown yourself. Sarah Jenkins nodded enthusiastically. And it connects them to the land, doesn't it? Especially here in Wales, where farming is such an important part of our heritage. As they talked, Charlotte was helping Margaret Davies with the science questions that were coming up in round 5. Despite being only 9 years old, Charlotte's careful explanations about the water cycle and different types of clouds were clear and patient. You're a natural teacher, sweetheart, Margaret said kindly. Have you thought about what you'd like to do when you grow up? Charlotte considered this seriously. I think I'd like to help people. Maybe be a doctor, or a teacher, or work with animals. There are so many interesting jobs. Meanwhile, George was discussing football strategies with Tom Davies, who had played amateur football in his youth. Tom was impressed by George's understanding of different formations and his knowledge of both English and Welsh players. You've got a good tactical mind, lad, Tom said approvingly. Do you play yourself? A bit, George said modestly. I'm still learning. Papa plays with us in the garden sometimes, and we practice passing and shooting. The history round proved to be challenging for everyone. Questions ranged from ancient Welsh kingdoms to Victorian inventions, from World War II battles to the building of the Severn Bridge. Each table was working hard, with family members pooling their knowledge and debating answers in hushed tones. Question 7, Gareth announced. Which Welsh prince was killed in 1282, effectively ending Welsh independence? William knew this one immediately. Llywelyn ap Griffith, but he let Charlotte answer. She had been studying Welsh history with her tutor and was proud to contribute to this round. It's so sad that Wales lost its independence, Charlotte said quietly to her family. But the Welsh people kept their language and culture, didn't they? They did, Kate agreed. And that's why it's so special that we can be here tonight, learning about Welsh traditions and meeting Welsh families. As the history round concluded, the atmosphere in the pub had become even more friendly and relaxed. The competitive element was still there. Everyone wanted their team to do well, but the real joy was clearly in the shared experience of learning and laughing together. Gareth announced that they were tied for second place with 2 other teams, just 3 points behind the current leaders, a group of university students who attended every week. George and Charlotte exchanged excited glances, while William and Kate marveled at how perfectly the evening was unfolding. One more round to go, Gareth called out cheerfully. The picture round. I'll be coming around with the sheets now. You'll have 15 minutes to identify all 20 images. As Gareth approached their table with the picture sheets, Charlotte sat up straighter, ready for the final challenge. The evening had exceeded all their expectations, but she was determined to help her family finish strong. Hashtag the Picture Round Challenge. The Picture Round sheets were distributed with much anticipation throughout the pub. 20 black and white photographs were arranged in a grid, each numbered and showing everything from famous landmarks to historical figures, from animals to everyday objects with a twist. Charlotte immediately recognized several images. "Look, Mama," she whispered excitedly, pointing to picture number 7. "That's a red kite. We saw one when we were walking near the reservoir last week." George was studying the sports-related images with intense concentration. Picture 15 showed a cricket player in action, and though the face was partially obscured, something about the batting style looked familiar to him from watching matches with his father. "I think that might be Joe Root," George said quietly to William. "The way he's holding the bat looks like his technique." William nodded approvingly. His son's growing interest in cricket had led to many conversations about different players' distinctive styles, and George was developing a good eye for these details. At the neighboring table, the Jenkins family was having their own animated discussion. The twins were confident about picture number 3, which showed a famous cartoon character, but they were struggling with some of the architectural images. "That's definitely Big Ben," Reese said, pointing to picture 12, "but what's that castle in number 18? Charlotte heard this and glanced over. The image showed a distinctive round tower and curtain wall that she recognized immediately from their visits around Wales. "Excuse me," she said politely to the Jenkins family. "Would you like a hint? That castle has something very special about its towers." Owen looked curious. "What kind of special?" "Well," Charlotte said carefully, not wanting to give away the answer completely, "it's famous for being where something very important happened in Welsh royal history. The towers are perfectly round, which was unusual for the time it was built." Sarah Jenkins smiled at Charlotte's diplomatic hint. "You're very kind to help, but we should probably work it out ourselves. Though I have to say, you children know an impressive amount about Wales for being so young." Kate felt a warm glow of pride at Charlotte's thoughtfulness. Her daughter had wanted to help, but had been careful not to simply give away the answer. It was exactly the kind of considerate behavior they tried to encourage. The 15 minutes were ticking by quickly, and each table was working intensively. Margaret and Tom Davies were having success with the historical photographs, recognizing several figures from Welsh history and British politics. Their years of experience and broad knowledge were showing. "I'm certain that's Aneurin Bevan in picture number 5, Margaret said confidently. "He founded the NHS, you know. Born right here in Wales, in Tredegar." Tom nodded and wrote down the answer. "Good spot, love. What about number 19? That bridge looks familiar." Meanwhile, the university students were racing through their sheet with impressive speed. Their youth and recent education were clearly advantages for some of the more contemporary images, but they seemed to be struggling with some of the older historical references. William was examining picture number 11, which showed what appeared to be a rare bird in flight. His years of interest in wildlife conservation had taught him to recognize many British species, but this one was challenging. "The wing pattern suggests it might be a curlew," he said thoughtfully to his family. "See how the wings curve? But the size seems a bit off." George looked closely at the image. "Could it be a whimbrel? They're similar to curlews, but smaller. We learned about them in our nature study." "Excellent thinking," Williams said proudly. "The proportions do look more like a whimbrel." Kate was working on the literary clues. Picture number 16 showed a distinctive house that she was sure was connected to a famous author, but she couldn't quite place it. The Georgian architecture and the rural setting suggested it might be somewhere in the countryside, possibly connected to the Romantic poets. "That house looks so familiar," she murmured. "The style is definitely late 18th or early 19th century. Could it be connected to Wordsworth? Or perhaps Jane Austen?" Charlotte studied the image carefully. "The gardens look very organized, Mama, and there are those distinctive chimneys. Maybe it's someone who wrote about gardens or nature." As the time wound down, families around the pub were making their final decisions and checking their answers one last time. The atmosphere was tense, but friendly, with quiet discussions at each table as people debated their more uncertain answers. "Time's up," Gareth called out cheerfully. "Please put your pencils down and pass your sheets to the table behind you for marking." The Cambridge family sheet went to Margaret and Tom Davies, while they received the answer sheet from the university students' table. This traditional system of cross-marking added to the community feel of the event, as neighbors checked each other's answers with good humor and fairness. Gareth began reading out the answers with his characteristic enthusiasm. Picture number 1 was Cardiff Castle. Number 2, the Welsh flag, which I hope everyone got. Number 3 was Paddington Bear. Number 4, Mount Snowdon. Each answer brought groans of disappointment or exclamations of triumph from around the pub. The Cambridge family had done well on most answers, though they had missed picture number 9, which turned out to be a famous Welsh poet they hadn't recognized. Picture number 18, Gareth continued, was Carnarvon Castle, famous for being where English princes of Wales have been invested. Charlotte smiled at the Jenkins twins, who had gotten this one right after her gentle hint about the round towers. The reciprocal nature of helping each other was one of the things she was enjoying most about the evening. As the marking continued, it became clear that several teams were very close in points. The university students maintained their lead, but the gap was narrowing. The Cambridge family found themselves tied with 2 other teams for second place, while Margaret and Tom Davies were close behind. The final picture, Gareth announced with a dramatic pause. Number 20 was a red kite in flight. These magnificent birds have made a remarkable comeback in Wales thanks to conservation efforts. George and Charlotte exchanged delighted looks. They had definitely gotten that one right. Their nature walks and William's passion for conservation had paid off. "Right then," Gareth said, as the marking concluded, "while we add up the final scores, why don't we have short break? The bar is open, and I believe Margaret has brought some of her famous Welsh cakes to share." The announcement of Margaret's Welsh cakes caused a stir of appreciation throughout the pub. It was clearly a tradition that everyone looked forward to, and the elderly woman beamed with pride as people began to gather around the bar area. Charlotte approached Margaret shyly. "Would it be all right if I asked you about the Welsh cakes? I've been wanting to learn how to make them." Margaret's face lit up with delight. "Of course, my dear. They're not difficult once you know the trick. The secret is getting the griddle just the right temperature, not too hot, or they'll burn on the outside and be raw in the middle." As Charlotte listened intently to Margaret's baking advice, the final scores were being calculated. The evening had been everything the royal family had hoped for, and more. They had genuinely connected with their local community, learned new things, and created the kind of normal family memories that were so precious to them. Hashtag sweet victory and new connections. The Welsh cakes were everything the pub's regular customers had promised they would be. Margaret Davies had brought 3 dozen of the traditional treats, still warm and dusted with sugar, their currents perfectly distributed throughout the sweet, spiced dough. Charlotte savored each bite while continuing her conversation with Margaret about baking techniques. "The key is not to overwork the dough," Margaret explained patiently. "Mix it just until it comes together, then roll it gently. Too much handling makes them tough." "It sounds like making pastry," Charlotte observed thoughtfully. "Our cook at home taught me that you have to keep everything cool and not mix too much." Margaret nodded approvingly. "Exactly right. You've got good instincts for baking. Would you like the recipe? I could write it down for you." Kate watched this exchange with genuine warmth. This was precisely the kind of cultural connection they had hoped their children would experience. Charlotte was learning about Welsh traditions directly from someone who had been making these cakes for decades, and the conversation was happening naturally, without any formality or protocol. Meanwhile, George had struck up a conversation with Reese and Owen Jenkins about their school's football team. The twins played for their local under-9 side and were eager to share their experiences with someone who clearly shared their passion for the game. "We practice twice a week," Owen explained enthusiastically. "Tuesday after school and Saturday morning. Our coach used to play for Bangor City." George's eyes widened with interest. "Really? What position did he play? Midfielder, Reese replied. He teaches us about passing and positioning. He says football is like chess. You have to think 3 moves ahead. William overheard this conversation and smiled. His son's love of football was genuine and growing, but even more importantly, George was learning to connect with other children through shared interests rather than through his royal status. At that moment, Gareth Williams called for everyone's attention. Right then, everyone, the final scores have been tallied, and we have some very close results tonight. The pub fell quiet with anticipation. Even though the prizes were modest, chocolates for the winning team and pub vouchers for the runners-up, everyone was invested in the outcome. It had been an evening of genuine competition and camaraderie. In 4th place, Gareth announced, with 38 points, we have the team of Helen, Mike, and young Emma from over Menai Bridge. Well done. Polite applause filled the pub. The family in question looked pleased despite not finishing higher. They were relatively new to the quiz and had clearly enjoyed themselves. 3rd place, with 41 points, goes to our stalwart competitors Margaret and Tom Davies. Magnificent effort, particularly on the history round. Margaret beamed and gave a little wave to acknowledge the applause. Tom looked pleased, but unsurprised. They were consistent performers who clearly enjoyed the intellectual challenge each week. 2nd place was very close indeed. Gareth continued, building the suspense. With 43 points, we have our Cambridge family, joined by their young scholars George and Charlotte. The applause was enthusiastic and genuine. Around the pub, people were looking at the royal family with appreciation for their participation and good sportsmanship. Charlotte blushed slightly at the attention, but looked delighted with their performance. And our winners tonight, Gareth announced with a flourish. With 45 points are our university students, David, Priya, and James. Congratulations. The 3 young adults looked thrilled with their victory. They had been coming to the quiz for several months and had slowly improved their performance. Their celebration was modest but genuine. As the formal part of the evening concluded, people began to mingle more freely. The Jenkins family approached the Cambridge table, and David Jenkins shook hands with William. Fantastic effort tonight, David said warmly. Your children are remarkably well-informed. You must be very proud. We are, Kate replied sincerely. But more than that, we're grateful for how welcoming everyone has been. This is exactly the kind of community spirit we hope to experience. Sarah Jenkins smiled. You're welcome to join us any Thursday. The children seem to have hit it off beautifully. Indeed, George and Charlotte were deep in conversation with the twins, making plans that went far beyond the quiz. Owen was describing the local nature trail where they often went birdwatching, while Reese was explaining the rules of a Welsh card game their grandfather had taught them. Could we perhaps organize a nature walk sometime? Charlotte asked hopefully. Owen says there's a place where you can see red kites almost every day. Kate and William exchanged glances. Their children were naturally building the kind of friendships that would enrich their understanding of Wales and its people. These weren't arranged royal engagements, but genuine connections based on shared interests and mutual respect. Margaret Davies approached with a carefully written recipe card for Charlotte. Here's the Welsh cake recipe, love, and I've added a few tips at the bottom that might help. Charlotte accepted the recipe with both hands and a little curtsy that came naturally to her. Thank you so much, Mrs. Davies. I'll practice making them, and perhaps I could bring some to share the next quiz? That would be lovely, dear. Nothing makes me happier than passing on traditional recipes to young people who appreciate them. Tom Davies turned to George with a twinkle in his eye. I hear you're interested in Welsh football. Have you ever been to a proper match? George shook his head. Not yet, but I'd love to go. Well then, Tom said, Bangor City has a home match next Saturday afternoon. Nothing fancy, but it's real Welsh football. The atmosphere is wonderful, and you'd see how passionate people get about their local team. William found himself genuinely considering this suggestion. A local football match would be another perfect opportunity for George to experience authentic Welsh culture, and the Davies family's invitation felt completely natural and unforced. As the evening wound down, Gareth Williams made his way over to their table. "I hope you've enjoyed your first quiz night with us," he said warmly. "You're welcome back anytime." "We've had a wonderful time," Kate assured him. "The children are already asking when we can return." "Well, we're here every Thursday at 7 sharp. Same format, though the questions change, of course. Next week, we're having a special round on Welsh literature in honor of St. David's Day preparations." Charlotte's face lit up at this news. "Welsh literature? I've been reading some Welsh stories and poems. That sounds fascinating." The natural enthusiasm in her voice made Gareth smile broadly. "Excellent. We always enjoy having young people who are genuinely interested in learning." As they prepared to leave, the royal family found themselves exchanging contact information with several of the other families. Phone numbers were shared for potential nature walks, football matches, and even a possible baking session with Margaret Davies. These weren't formal royal engagements being arranged by private secretaries. These were genuine friendships beginning to form, based on shared interests, mutual respect, and the simple pleasure of spending time together. Hashtag a perfect ending and new beginnings. The drive home through the Welsh countryside was filled with animated conversation. George and Charlotte couldn't stop talking about their new friends, the questions they had answered correctly, and the ones they wished they had known. The autumn evening was clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky above the rolling hills. "I can't believe we came second," Charlotte said for the third time, clutching Margaret's handwritten Welsh cake recipe. "And the Jenkins twins were so nice. Owen knows so much about birds, and Reese is really good at maths like me." George was equally enthusiastic. "Tom Davies said he played football until he was 65, and he promised to teach me about local Welsh teams that I don't know about yet. Did you know that Wrexham is the oldest professional football club in Wales?" Kate turned in her seat to smile at her children. "I'm so proud of how you both behaved tonight. You were polite, inclusive, and genuinely interested in learning about everyone we met. It was fun being just a normal family," Charlotte said thoughtfully. "Nobody treated us differently. They just liked talking to us about things we all enjoyed." William nodded as he navigated the familiar country roads. "That's exactly what we hoped would happen. Tonight showed us that the most meaningful connections happen when we share common interests and respect each other as people." As they approached their residence, the children were already making plans for their return visit to the Dragon's Rest. Charlotte wanted to research Welsh literature before the St. David's Day quiz, while George was hoping to learn more about Welsh rugby to complement his growing football knowledge. "Can we really go to that football match with Mr. Davies?" George asked hopefully. He made it sound so exciting, with everyone singing and supporting their team together. "We'll need to make proper arrangements," William replied carefully, "but I think it could be wonderful. Experiencing local football culture would be educational and fun for you." Charlotte was studying her Welsh cake recipe by the interior car light. "Mama, could we ask our cook if I could use the kitchen to practice making these? I want to get them right before I bring any to share." "I'm sure that can be arranged," Kate said with a smile. "Though perhaps we should start with a small batch until you perfect the technique." As they pulled into their driveway, William reflected on how perfectly the evening had met their hopes and expectations. They had wanted to experience genuine Welsh community life, and they had found exactly that. More importantly, their children had made real connections with local families based on shared interests and mutual respect. "You know," Kate said as they gathered their things from the car, "tonight reminded me why we love living in Wales. The people are so warm and welcoming, and there's such a strong sense of community." The children nodded in agreement, though Charlotte was more focused on carefully folding her recipe card to keep it safe. Mrs. Davies said Welsh cakes are best when they're made with love and patience. "I want to make sure I do them properly." George was already planning his week. "I'm going to read about Bangor City before Saturday, so I know about their players and their history when we watch them play." As they entered their home, the family felt a deep satisfaction with their evening. This hadn't been a formal royal engagement or a carefully orchestrated photo opportunity. It had been a genuine family experience that had brought them closer to their Welsh community and given their children valuable lessons in connecting with people from all walks of life. Will you help me research Welsh poets tomorrow, Mama? Charlotte asked as she got ready for bed. I want to be ready for the literature round next week. Of course, Kate replied. We could visit the local library and see what Welsh poetry books they recommend. It might be interesting to learn about poets who lived in this area. William tucked George into bed and listened to his son's continued enthusiasm about the evening. Papa, do you think we could have our own quiz night sometimes? We could invite the Jenkins family and maybe Mrs. and Mr. Davies too. That's a wonderful idea, William said thoughtfully. We could take turns hosting and maybe each family could prepare questions about their favorite topics. As the children settled down for the night, Kate and William reflected on the success of their simple evening out. They had achieved something that often seemed difficult to balance, giving their children normal childhood experiences while also deepening their connection to Wales and its people. The best part, Kate observed, was watching George and Charlotte interact so naturally with the other children. They weren't thinking about protocol or formality. They were just being themselves. William agreed completely, and the adults treated them as children first, not as royal children. That made all the difference in creating genuine connections. Looking ahead, both parents could see how this one evening had opened up numerous possibilities for their family's integration into local Welsh life. The quiz night had been just the beginning. There would be football matches to attend, nature walks to take, baking sessions to arrange, and new friendships to nurture. I think Margaret Davies might become Charlotte's unofficial Welsh grandmother, Kate said with a laugh. Did you see how carefully she wrote out that recipe? She's clearly taken our daughter under her wing. And Tom Davies seems determined to turn George into a proper Welsh football supporter, William added. Though I suspect George is more than willing to be converted. As they prepared for bed themselves, both Kate and William felt a deep gratitude for the evening they had shared. In an age where royal duties often involved formal ceremonies and official engagements, it was precious to experience something as simple and genuine as a local pub quiz. The evening had reminded them that the most meaningful aspects of royal life often happened in quiet moments of connection with the people they served. Tonight, they hadn't been representing the crown or fulfilling official duties. They had simply been a family enjoying themselves in their local community, building the kinds of relationships that would enrich their lives and deepen their understanding of Wales. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and responsibilities, but tonight had given them something invaluable, genuine friendships, cultural connections, and happy memories that their children would treasure long into the future. The Dragon's Rest pub quiz had become more than just a fun evening out. It had become a bridge between their royal responsibilities and their desire to live as an integral part of the Welsh community they loved. As the house settled into peaceful quiet, the Welsh countryside around them remained as beautiful and welcoming as the people they had met that evening. The stars shone brightly over the hills and valleys that had become their true home, and the royal family slept soundly, already looking forward to next Thursday's return to the Dragon's Rest and another evening of questions, laughter, and friendship.